Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. Bradley's mother, Narki Skolin, passed away 3 months ago. He is autistic and needs structured routine and therapies he receives for his autism 6 days a week. However, Italy just entrusted Bradley to Italian social services. If he is ruled to go back, he will face the next 3 to 4 years in the Italian foster care system where he can't speak or understand the language. He will be then taken away from the only family he has ever known. Please call Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390. That's Governor Hochul at 518-474-8390 to voice your concerns to please keep Bradley here in the United States. Hashtag keep Bradley safe. I have a brand new guest on. I have Terri and Mark Stemann on. They run LetOurChildrenGo.org. When learning of the nightmare of protective services and the threat it poses to the family unit, a clearinghouse of information seemed to be missing. A place that pulled together the multiple areas of research and resources that were available for these affected. Aside from knowledge of the problem, it is their hope that you find a place of comfort here, knowing that you are not alone in this fight against CPS. I welcome you to my podcast, Terri and Mark. Thank you for coming on.
Hi,
How,
Marianne.
yeah, so how did all this begin?
Yeah, well, it started for us personally in 2016 with the theft of our 7 homeschooled children by the state of Kentucky. And as I we were looking for information and getting educated on what was going on with the system, it seemed like there was some good information out there, but it was sort of scattered. And so as we went about continuing learning about what was happening, I sort of just started interacting with different families and wanted to have a place for people that were being affected by this to come to be able to get research and resources. And so that's one of the things behind our mission at Let Our Children Go, is to provide education um, for people that are affected by this, or for people that are advocates for the families. And so it's still a work in progress, but we do have a website at LetOurChildrenGo.org, and we have a contact form on there for families to reach out to us. And another part of our mission is to help with the restoration of the families that have been put through the system, whether it's helping with the trauma that the children and the family members endure from separation, up to helping foster children that age out of the system and need assistance with finding their family, and helping with being able to help the families to restore their relationships once they are able to come back together, even if that means it's after the child is, of age as an adult. So that's the mission behind Let Our Children Go, and we're still growing that, and we hope to expand it significantly in the years ahead. And so any families that are affected that would like to reach out to us, we do help with connecting people to some resources that we have, and they can reach us through the contact page there on the website. And we can talk a little bit about how we actually got pulled into the CPS and family court system, if your audience would be interested in hearing some of that part of
Oh,
our
yes.
story also.
Yes.
Yeah. So
What it's so tragic when this happens that a lot of people really don't think this happens until it happens to them.
right. Yeah. There are a few people out there that you'll come across that are advocates and helping families, but a lot of times people think it's like a one-off, you know, a rare
Mm.
situation that, oh yeah, that's too bad that happened to you, but they don't ever think it could happen to them until it does. And then they find out there's a lot of other families out there that it is happening to.
Isn't it like is it 2 or 3 out of 4 families are touched by CPS? I mean, I remember hearing that in one of my podcasts that there was a stat that.
Yeah, there's some statistics out there. I can't remember what they are right now, but it is I think a pretty high amount of children that will be at least have some kind of investigation or something open, not necessarily removal maybe, but
Mhm.
yeah, it's becoming, it seems like um, it seems to me that it's going to become more prevalent with some of the things that are happening culturally in our society that parents may not agree with things being done to their children, and it can be used against the parent to say that they're um, emotionally or medically neglecting their child if
Mhm.
they don't go along with certain things. So it's important that people realize the threat that it is and come together to raise awareness so that we can stop it from happening.
Mhm.
So we can talk a little bit about what happened with us, if you'd like, back in
Mhm.
2016. If Mark,
Yeah, Terry likes it. She
I don't,
prefers that
yeah,
I
I don't
share the
really care
narrative, and
talking about
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, so she likes to talk a lot about the impact on children that are affected, and then like she was doing in respect to the organization and what she does with that overall, and we kind of share in that responsibility. Terry is the main overseer of Let Our Children Go. I work along with her, but we also have another organization that I spearheaded, and it's the Heritage and Freedom Coalition, which people can find at h3fc.com. And reason for that, which is our umbrella organization that we're working to bring Let Our Children Go into, along with so many other issues, because um, the the real mission behind both organizations is to stop tyranny and the deprivations of our rights, and the harm that it's doing to our country and to our children. And so we really want to stop the drivers of a lot of this tyranny and the things that we're being subjected to without any respect to our constitutional protections. And so that's what's really the Heritage and Freedom Coalition is about, because there's many other issues across the United States that are affecting American citizens in respect to our freedom. And we also want to join together with people who have those concerns, because if we have the protections of our constitutional rights, and we have a system of government which was established to secure our rights, then we will have our children. We will not have the things that we're seeing happen in respect to the unlawful separation of children that Terry mentioned. And so it's really crucial to properly identify what's going on, because when we talk about CPS, Marianne, it's a lot of people, the first reaction is when they hear that, well, there was a CPS issue, is their first question or their reaction is, well, what did you do wrong?
Mhm.
And for your audience, it's important to understand that in just about every state in our union, child abuse and neglect, being the serious matter that it is a crime. And what's really happening, though, is they are conducting what we refer to as a fraud op. And
Mhm.
what we want to highlight for our fellow Americans and even anyone tuning in around the world is that um, they frame these actions against parents as a civil proceeding. But unless there has been a contract made by a family pursuant to the oversight of their family with anyone in government, the only action that the government should be taking against any family should be in respect to criminal due process. And so what they're doing in most cases, probably over 80% of the ones that we know of, there is no charge or a conviction of a crime. And so what they're doing is they're showing up at people's homes on an allegation. Sometimes with the families we talk to, it will be a fabricated one. We have evidence of that happening to us, and we'll get to that in a few minutes. But what will happen is they will show up and they will take actions against the family, and they will say, well, we need to remove the children in the name of safety and best interests.
Mhm.
But what's really happening is that they're facilitating a not just a child theft racket, but also a money laundering or money theft and money laundering operation, where under the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, which opened up the coffers of large amounts of our Title IV Social Security money, that money flows out to various state agencies and to foster care providers in the name of taking the children. And what happens is the parents then are subjected to this civil proceeding where it's conducted in closed courts, where in most cases, if not all of them, there is no jury trial up there, in respect to the allegation. And so with closed courts, locked doors, no public oversight, no juries, and then just a narrative projected. Well, they facilitate this scheme, and then they don't really, they hide behind various things that they do to parents, like gag orders, which are unlawful under the First Amendment. And then they will also claim that they have additional protections that we can talk to here in a few minutes. I'm just going to throw it out there, though, in respect to immunity. This is a bigger problem where they claim they have protection against civil liability or criminal liability under various immunity laws. But I want people to know right up front, we can talk about this here a little bit later at length, but there is no immunity in the United States under Title 42, Chapter 21, Section 1981. And I encourage people to type that into your favorite browser and look it up. It'll come right up and you can read it. That we all have the right in the United States to sue or to be subject to the same punishments, pains, and penalties. So that includes judges, that includes attorneys, that includes medical practitioners, police. And so all of these color of law things really are deprivations of our rights. And because that 1981 Title 42, Chapter 21 federal law states very clearly that it is a statement of equal rights. And people must understand that what's been happening in our country is the enactment of these things pursuant to the destruction of families, which is what's happening, and then the unlawful establishment of color of law, lawlessness is what I call it. And so these things have been enacted pursuant to the Adoption and Safe Families Act of 1997, and a few years on either side of it, almost looks as if there was something that was being prepared toward a seditious operation to undermine our republic. And so this is really what's happening in the bigger picture. And so we're out here now on behalf of not just ourselves, but the hundreds of thousands of families that have been affected by this over many years. And many of them have been out in the public arena themselves, but we're out here to do our part, just let people know, anyone who's willing to listen and research for themselves what's really going on. And so our aim is to, like Terri said, to reveal and then hopefully repeal the ASFA and the things that are driving it, these various state laws that are not really lawful, these immunity laws, and then the work to restore. And then also in the meantime, until we can do all that, we also want to build local action groups to where whenever there's something that's going on in the community, to prevent the unlawful taking of a child, if we can, just to show up and ask questions. And that we wouldn't just let these people show up under the color of law and then walk off with people's children to be trafficked, truly harmed, or maybe in many cases that we've seen even end up dead. And so it's a huge problem across our country. And we're here just to share that information and then invite people to join together for that local action to national impact. So we're working to build chapters and local action groups throughout the country, and we invite people who want to step up and operate within the realm of the facts and the truth instead of the lie and the fraud op, that we can affect the change that we so sorely need. And so that's kind of a little bit about the big picture in respect to the mission and what's happening truly across the country. But we were thrust into this in February, March 2016, and it began for us when we took our 17-year-old daughter, Amy. She was the first of our 7 beautiful children, and that have come about through our 25-year marriage. And we took her in for a simple eye test with a practitioner that we had never seen before, because we had become aware that she may have had a problem seeing certain signs when we had been out driving around. So we wanted to get her a driver's license, and so we wanted to make sure that she was good and she was going to be okay. And so we went to this practitioner, and just for the sake of our time, I'm only going to touch upon the highlights of this, and because there's really a lot to our story. And so it began on February 25th when Terri and Amy went in to go see a practitioner, very young doctor, fresh out of residency, and did the eye check, and then proceeded to conduct an overall general well check that involved a height and weight assessment. And then there was a question as to, well, that they wanted to take blood from our daughter. And, Amy did not want to have that done. And Terri was uncomfortable with it because she wasn't identified as having any condition. So there was really no need to take any blood. And so, they refused. And then it kind of evolved into a questioning in respect to Amy's eating habits, because apparently after her weight check, and because Amy has a body type like her mom and dad, which would be normal being that she's our daughter, tall and thin, and a young adolescent who had undergone a big growth spurt like normal adolescents do, and so they started questioning her eating habits, and it was very uncomfortable. And so that appointment ended, and then within about a week or so, might have been a few days, we don't know, I can't remember exactly right now, but Terri started receiving calls from this practitioner and insisting that she bring Amy back in because she may be anorexic. And Terri felt very uncomfortable with that, and we knew that, we talked about it, and we knew that that was not true, because we had observed our daughter's eating habits her entire life, and she was fine, and she was progressing, And so after a few calls back and forth, the call stopped, and then everything was kind of fine. And throughout that period, we were getting Amy involved in some competition, and I think Terri can comment a little bit about that because she was more involved. So Amy was very active along with her brothers and sisters in the local community, had them involved in a lot of activities. We were a homeschooling family. And what was that pageant that she went to?
It was I think I sent you a picture, Marianne. It was actually, she had started preparing for that before this initial doctor's appointment. I think, I'm not sure what the time frame is for how all that played out, but I think it used to be called the Young Miss or Junior Miss competition, and then I think they changed the name to it. It was the Distinguished Young Women's competition or something.
Yeah, it was a Distinguished Young Women's competition where there was, she participated with a bunch of other girls, and in the pictures that we have, she's the tallest girl of all the girls. And which is just, because she's tall like mom and dad. And but she was active in the competition. I mean, they had to go through mental exercises, physical, strenuous physical activity, and all this stuff. And so she went to that, had a great time. And then afterwards, then on March 25th, I was at work, and I received notice from my HR person that I had an emergency. I needed to go home sometime around early afternoon. And when I went home, Terri was kind of upset, and she had been receiving some calls as someone who was saying that they were from CPS and that we needed to call them back right away. Would not say what they were, necessarily what it was about. And so, I told her, I said, after we, got everybody settled down and back into some of the routine, that, we'll just wait and see if we get any other calls or how that unfolds. And so later that night, we had a normally scheduled family visit with the girlfriend and of Terry's father, and him, who lived just a few houses down the street from where we were residing at the time. And we went to that went down there. When we walked in, the girlfriend of Terry's father handed us a document that appeared to be from CPS, and she handed me. I looked at it, and I said, my first impression was this is just really kind of this is a shoddy looking document. Overall, it looked shoddy. It had like lines through the names of the people at the top of the heading. Like the people weren't even properly identified as far as like the government officials. And but then it also had the appearance like it was just a little bit too cutely made. And so like it didn't appear like someone had just written it. And so I looked at it, and then she got real belligerent with us, and became physically engaging with us to the point of taking a swipe at me, and then blocked Terry and hit her. And from leaving, we gathered up our children and we left. And she was like, "It's from CPS," and just kept going on and on about it. And so we went back to our home and tried to calm everything back down. And then the next day, Terry and the kids went out for a library activity and some other things. And then we had another document that was left at our door, as if from CPS, stating that they were aware that on the document that we had received the first one, and we needed to call them right away. And on looking at both of these documents, still had the same anomalies on them. And so I have some real questions, because having been in the Air Force, I'm a retired Air Force veteran, served for 20 years. I worked with a lot of official documents, and so I knew that there was something not looking right here, and they look like forged documents to me. And so the next day, the 27th, we had no visits. No one came to our home. And then we had set up an appointment up to that time with a second practitioner that Terry was familiar with, just for our own additional look into our daughter, because we want to make sure that we weren't going to miss anything. And so Terry went to that appointment with Amy, and during the course of the exam, did the same type of well check. They did want to take blood, but they didn't press it like the first one did. And so, Terry and Amy politely declined and said, well, okay, well, maybe, later on, or if there's something that we need to look at, that's fine. And so same type of questioning, but I mean, in respect to her overall wellness, but nothing specific, like in respect to, her eating habits or anything like that. Her weight was 12 pounds heavier, and her height was shorter than the first one. And her words were, and Terry always made a point of it, and whenever we discuss it, that she said healthy weight, and we knew that, and so there was no problem in our mind. And so they provided us graciously a good health document where they wrote up a summary saying our daughter's in good health and under no restrictions. And then right after that appointment, I took those documents. I took the good health document, and I took the other two CPS inquiry documents down to go see the CPS supervisor in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. And I wanted to ask a question as to whether these documents were legitimate or what was going on. And so what happened he said, oh yeah, so we hand these out to people whenever there's a child welfare issue. And I said, what's the problem? He said, well, we received a diagnosis that your daughter Amy is severely anorexic, and that without immediate treatment, she's going to die soon. And he said, will you submit to an interview? And I said, no. I said, I'm not going to submit to an interview. I said, I have a good health document here. I said, here it is. I showed it to him. He wanted to take it off my hands, and I wasn't going to let him take it. And I wanted to see whatever it was he was saying he had. Well, he didn't provide it. It looked like he was reading something off of a computer screen. And so I said, well, you can call the medical provider off of this document, gave him the number, and he was like, well, I can't do that because of HIPAA law. And said, oh, yes, you can. If there's a legitimate CPS inquiry, you're going to be able to make that call. Just make the call. Well, I didn't like where that was going. And so he said, well, you can get a copy of this document I have down at the records section. So I ended it. I ended the meeting because he kept wanting me to submit to an interview. I wouldn't do it. And so what happened was, on my way out, he said, well, I just want you to know I really can get the document, but I just wanted to see if you would comply. Like, that was the first time I heard the word comply, and then it came over and over and over again. And I said, well, now I know that you're lying to me. I said, well, I'm really done with you. I said, there's nothing wrong here. I said, this is a closed case. You have no case. And so I left, and I couldn't get a document from the records section. It was standard bureaucracy, nobody there. And then when somebody did show up, they couldn't help me. And so I eventually left without anything that they could provide me, which really raised the question for me is they probably didn't have anything to begin with. Mm-hmm. So the next day on March 29th, we received another document as if from CPS at our house. It was just left outside our side door, and it said that if we don't call them right away, they're gonna petition. They're gonna get a petition to remove all 7 of our children. And it looked just as shoddy as the other other 2, and similar in some areas, which I thought was pretty interesting. And then so I just took it in, and then later that night, you know, and now during this time, no one is making any attempt to show up other than these documents at our house.
Just being dropped off.
Yeah, exactly. And so later that night, I had to leave and on some personal business, and Terri was home. And in the dark of night, as she was getting the kids ready for bed, normal routine, getting everybody settled in, she got a knock on the door from someone who appeared to be a Louisville Metro police officer or some sort of a law enforcement officer, and someone who claimed to be a CPS social worker, someone who claimed to be, and you know, since Terri was there, you know, I'm going to let her explain what happened there, so I can get a little sip of water here, because she was there that night, so I'll let her talk about this here for a minute.
Yeah, so someone came to the door, law enforcement, and so I mean, I didn't open the door, so I'm not exactly sure who it was that was there, but they said they wanted to come in to question the children, and I probably asked if they had a warrant or something, but I did not allow them entry into the home, and so they eventually left. They didn't break the door down because there was supposedly one of my children was in immediate danger of dying, according to, I guess, what this CPS supervisor had said. And, you know, so they left, and
yeah, so I came home, and of course, you know, Terri was upset, and we calmed everybody down. Everything was fine. So because I could see the events that were unfolding here, I wanted to be there for my family, and I didn't want Terri to be home during the day. So I took the week off of work. And the next day on March 30th, nothing was going on until around 2:30 or 2:40 or so. And we noticed that police cars began to show up at the girlfriend of Terri's father's home, whom we could see from the side of where we were living at the time. And then around 3 o'clock, we had 2 officers from the Louisville Metro Police Department come to our home, and the officers knocked on the door, and I answered it, and they said, "Mark, I need you to open the door. You lost custody of all 7 of your children." And so it was like, you know, just like that. And we asked them if they had any paperwork, or, you know, and they said, well, we have an emergency, like a custody order, and we asked them to present the document, and they had no document to present. And so I referred to it, because we have this on video, as a protective order, because I didn't know anything about a custody order. But he kept saying that they had an order, and they would not show us any paperwork. They had no, like, any service of process. And he said, well, we have a verbal order. And well, at the time we didn't know this, but we found out through the course of a deeper investigation that they're not authorized to remove a child on a verbal order pursuant to a child welfare action. And so, you know, that wasn't even valid, what he was saying. And he did make it clear. He's like, well, you haven't committed a crime. You're not going to jail. He just wanted me to open the door and then to speak to this social worker, but we weren't going to open the door, and they had no warrant. Now, under state law, Marianne, they're required, or they per procedure, if they attempt entry to a home like they did the night before, they could have gone and gotten a search warrant, you know, to enter the home if they had a legitimate child welfare action. Well, they didn't do that. They didn't have any paperwork. We asked them for a warrant. They had nothing. So this went on for about a total of 2 hours, but about halfway through, because we didn't like where this was going, and we had the windows open in our home, they could see all of the children. Additional officers began to show up, and then Terri called 911, And that brought out even more. So we had like a total, I don't know, 7 or 8 police cars, something like that. A bunch of officers that surrounded the house. They were banging on the front door, the side door, looking in our windows and, holding their hands on their guns and, all this huge intimidating scene. And we're just all there. We were just educating our kids. And so we refused them to do what, to open the door. And so one of the higher ranking officers, he was like, well, you want me to go get a warrant? And we're like, well, do whatever you have to do. And we only lived about, I don't know, 15 minutes away from the courthouse. So, with a siren and a lights going, they could have gone, if they had just forgotten something, they could have driven down there, picked it up and brought it right back and served it. But they did none of that. Okay. So after we, refused them and they could see they weren't going to get anywhere, Terri, and they were still there, Terri called the local news media and they came out and they set up in the church parking lot next to where we were living. And so once they started filming, then everything began to change a little bit, and the social worker goes over and talks to them. And then the police eventually came back and they say, well, we're going to go ahead and rescind the order. And we're going to get out of here. And so this was about probably around an hour and a half or so into it. And because we had also gotten on the phone an attorney who worked in the area, and he apparently had been talking with the officers. Now, during this entire scene, we had the girlfriend of Terri's father and her father and a couple other of her relatives come down, and we had an unmarked car in the parking lot. That we knew was an unmarked car because the girlfriend of Terri's father had a twin brother on the Louisville Metro Police Department at the time. And we felt that he may have been there overseeing this little scene. So, the girlfriend of Terri's father, we watched her come walk down the street with her father who came in a truck. And we have all this on video, and they talked to the officer, they talked to the unmarked car and some of the other officers, but they make no attempt to come up and advocate for us or anything. And they have never advocated for us throughout this entire ordeal now that's coming up on 7 years. But going back to that day, after they said they were going to rescind the order, I said, you guys never presented an order. There wasn't even an order. So they presented a summons to court on a notebook piece of paper that the officer pulled out of his pocket, little memo pad, and he wrote that this Judge Haggerty, just wants to see the children. And it was like an issuance of a summons on a notebook piece of paper. And I was like, there is just no way that could be legitimate. That isn't how they serve court process. And so he stuck it in the door, and then after that, they left. So when we continued our conversation with the attorney, I said, I want a copy of the original order and a copy of whatever it is they say that they're rescinding. And he's like, yeah, it's coming across the fax line. He's like, I'll get it right out over to you. Well, nothing else came to me that night. But the next day, after around 9 o'clock, he calls me on the phone. He says, Mark, I got something for you to pick up. I need you to come down to the office and pick it up. And I was like, look, if this is something from the court or process, that's it. The police have to serve that. So I didn't go because I felt like it was going to be a place where they could entrap me, get me out of the house. And so what happened was they brought a document. It was like something that looked like it was just typed up on a memorandum, like a Microsoft Word program, and like some sort of a signature on it. And it basically said it was a hold in abeyance order pursuant to us coming to court on April the 1st. And so, we took it, and then later that night, in the middle of a wind and rainstorm, or shortly thereafter, someone came by our house in plain clothes, don't know who it was, and dropped off a summons document, one each for Terri and I. So we had a total of like 14 pages. They got partially wet, and when we tried to dry them out, they only had initials, had no signature. Did not have a petition attached, even though on the summons it said it did have a petition attached. And what we later found out was it should have included 2 other documents, one of them an emergency custody order, and then another document. So there was none of that. And so we dried them out, and we took it. And then the next day, April 1st came around, and because they had two of our children's names on the documents that were not spelled correctly and not properly therefore identified. I had a question as to the legitimacy of it, along with some of the other documents. And so I attempted to call the court and to just get a hold of somebody and just try to find any way we could verify that this was some sort of legitimate thing going on.
Right.
So we got the standard runaround and never got anywhere. And so I had typed up another thing for supposedly the judge who was, identified on that notebook piece of paper, and who we later researched was present in Division 5 of the family court system. That the children's names were not identified. We're not sure this is legitimate. So all of a sudden, our car didn't work. All of a sudden, our car stopped. It wouldn't start. And we have some issues as far as what was going on with that, because that was actually the girlfriend's car of Terry's father at one time. And then eventually, and we later found out it had like a Viper vehicle control device on it and everything else. You could lock it and everything else. And so all of a sudden we couldn't start the car. So we called 911 and had a Louisville Metro police officer come out, and I asked them to take what I had down to the courthouse, see if they could verify for us, because I feel like my children are in danger of being kidnapped, or is there something going on here? Well, the officer came out, refused to do that. So 1 o'clock came around, because that's when we were supposed to go, according to what we were told, April 1st at 1 o'clock. So, well, we couldn't get there. And so, and I didn't think it was legitimate anyway. And so I'm thinking, well, if there is a legitimacy of this, they're going to come and probably arrest us for not showing up in court. Well, none of that happens. Another officer comes to our house a little bit after 2 o'clock the same day. And he says, I don't know what's going on here. I was just dispatched to do a welfare check. Yep, all the children are fine. We had them, visible and with the windows and everything. And by the door he came up to. And so he's like, okay. And then he left. And so up to this point, we're thinking, well, supposedly they're there for all this alleged emergency concerning my daughter, but no one's acting to secure the alleged need for supposedly her imminent danger. And so here we are again, another officer comes to the door. Well, no one else comes back the rest of that day until around 5 o'clock in the afternoon on April the 1st. The CPS supervisor that I met with on March 28th, and Terry's aunt, who was in her security guard uniform, came up to our house, and he had a stack of documents, and he was saying something. I was like, whatever you have, you can leave there. I said, but you have no case. And so he left the documents. They walked back down the street to the girlfriend of Terry's father's house, and they attempted to call us, and we didn't answer it. But in the stack of documents was an emergency custody order, one for each of the 7 children, an affidavit, and a dependency calendar. So the CPS supervisor is apparently serving court process. What we later found out was that the court rules prohibit the service of process pursuant to a child welfare action by a social services officer. They're not allowed to do that. And so, when we got the documents, 3 of our children were identified as being given emergency custody, being given, I think, to her mother and father. They already had it predetermined as far as to who our children were supposedly going to go to. That was her father and his girlfriend. And so, I know we're going to be getting short on time here, but we eventually, so I'm going to kind of move this along a little bit. But eventually, what happened was we were able to. Well, I'm going to first highlight the fact that when we looked at these documents, they clearly met all the criteria for a forged document. They were incomplete. It appeared that the social services supervisor, whose name was Roy Hardy, had appeared to, it looked like his signature, RH, was on the deputy clerk of court block for the emergency custody order, that he was signing as a deputy clerk of court, and even though he wasn't a deputy clerk of court. So when I saw the fraudulent and the forgery aspect of these documents, the next day I met with Jefferson County Sheriff's at one of the larger churches in Louisville, Kentucky. And I explained everything up to this point, to include showing him the dependency calendar. And on the dependency calendar, it had a bench warrant out for me with cash bond of $5,000. And that's what he had in the stack of documents that he dropped off on the afternoon of April 1st. So when the sheriff guy saw that, he of course took my ID and he goes outside the room and he makes a phone call. When he comes back, I'm thinking, well, if there's something legitimate, he's going to arrest me right there. Well, he didn't do that because there was nothing in the system. And so, his position was like, well, we recommend you just see if you're on the court docket, but I wanted them to open up some sort of an inquiry and investigation into why they wouldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to secure counsel with someone that was, that we were able to connect with through another church, the church that we lived by, and then we had received another set of summons. I think it was on April the 4th, the same type, one for each of us, but now going to the emergency division, Division 9, on April the 6th. And initially, the attorney we got said, well, just give me the good health document. You don't need to go. And then it evolved into, well, yeah, you need to come, Mark. And then it went to, no, you come, Mark, and then bring your daughter, Amy. And so on April the 6th, after meeting with him before the commencement of the proceeding, I went home, and Amy's jumping on the trampoline with her sister. So she's just having a fun-filled day. Had to interrupt that and stop it. And when I went down to the court, there was no attempt to take Amy immediately to the hospital. The CPS supervisor met us and wanted to the CPS social worker, her name was Shaniqua Potter. She wanted to start asking questions, want all this information. They took Amy off of the guardian ad litem. And then when they were done with her, and the proceeding commenced, we go into the courtroom, and we present the good health document. And the other side says that they thought I had forged that good health document. I was thinking, all you have to do is just call them. I'm sure that, they'll be happy to testify. Call them on the phone right now. Well, they didn't do that. And so the judge looked at the good health document. And then my daughter gets up and says, I don't want to go to the hospital. I'm fine. She gets lectured by the judge to sit down. And then eventually she said, well, I need to take her right over to the hospital. So they give her to the girlfriend of Terry's father, who should not have been in the courtroom under state law because she's not really a family member,
Mm-hmm.
and the aunt who was with the CPS supervisor on April the 1st. So they walk out, and unbeknownst to me, at the time, and I'll explain what happened, they called my wife on the phone and ordered her from the courtroom, the judge did, to release our other 6 children, or they were going to hold me until she did. And so while I'm thinking, they should have at least probably transported our daughter under state law with someone from the government, that they didn't do that. Well, what I later found out from Terri was they took her back to our house and began to move her things out from our house, and made 4 trips from our house, walking down the street to the girlfriend of Terry's father and to her father's house. And so it wasn't until later in the evening, I guess at some point, and I was somewhere else, I'll get to that in a minute, that they eventually took her to the hospital. And they held her there for a total of 10 days against her will. She had someone observing her, everything that she was doing, and she wasn't allowed to go outside. And at the end of her 10-day visit, she was not diagnosed with anorexia nervosa. So I'm gonna rewind a bit, because when I was in the courtroom still, they then moved against me, and so we need to detain Mark until we get the other 6 kids. And after Terri hung up on the phone on the judge and said no one's going to take my children from me, they arrested me without charging me with a crime, and they took me through the other doors, and they booked me, and they ran me through the entire booking process. Held me there for about, a little bit, around 22 hours, give or take an hour or so. And then they put me in solitary because I asked the question after about 3 hours why I was still there. And they said I had been charged with abuse and neglect, 7 counts, and my bail was $35,000. And then another one was saying, well, no, you're here on contempt. You're here until your next court hearing, which is, a week away. And, I still had a job at the time, and I'm thinking, well, I got to get to work. I can't be here another week. And so after the next day, around 2 o'clock in the afternoon or so, they called my name and I was released. And that was it. And I'll go back to my attorney, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry that happened." And he typed up a work release letter. And in the work release letter, he said, "I have not been charged with a crime." Okay. But that I would have to be reappearing at these future sessions pursuant to whatever they were going to do. And we had no understanding as far as what any of this was about at the time. We had never heard anything about how CPS operates or any of that. And so then we began the reclamation process of our children. And as some of your listeners may know, and for those who don't, under the Adoption and Safe Families Act, what they want people to do is to sign on to a case plan. And they will run people through a whole slew of services to include like a psychiatric or psychological evaluation, a family counseling, a drug test, anger management, whether you need any of those things or not. So they want you to sign on to a case plan, because under that, they get additional Title IV money under the ASFA. So we refused to sign on to a case plan. And so, we felt that we had a constitutional right under the Kentucky Constitution not be subject to involuntary servitude. I think it's Section 25. And then the 13th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution says we're not to be subject to servitude to the government unless we've been convicted of a crime. And so because there's no crime, we just felt that we had a right to refuse, and we insisted on the return of our children. Well, they would never give them back. And because we would not comply with services, they eventually gave permanent custody to the girlfriend of Terry's father and to her aunt. And so they split our children. And when we went through the so-called pseudo trial, and by that point we were representing ourselves, even though they wanted to really give me, the daughter of the prosecuting attorney, as my counsel, and we refused. We asked for a jury trial, and we were denied that, which is a federal crime under 18 U.S. Code Chapter 13, Section 241 and 242. No American can be deprived of a constitutional right. That's a Sixth and Seventh Amendment protection. And we were proceeded against in a closed court, which also violated the Kentucky Constitution about all courts are to be open. And so I'm going to take this to a point. But toward the end of 2016, we went into the court file and retrieved as many documents as we could. And we were able to acquire some writing, a letter from the girlfriend of Terry's father. Her name is Julie Asef. Her brother's name, the twin brothers, Danny Asef or Daniel Asef, ASSEF. And we began to see similar images on CPS documents, on the inquiry letters, and then on the court documents that we were getting, and even the things that were mailed to us, with a very distinctive writing style. So what I did, well, we kind of worked it together, but I scanned every document I could get out of the court file, and the source documents from writings that she had sent to us in 2013, this 2-page letter. And then we were able to get something going all the way back to 2005, a party invitation that we could corroborate, which was similar to the writing on this 2013 letter. And we scanned everything, extracted everything, and we went through every letter, A through Z, and then 0 through 9 on every piece of mail that we got from them. And it could definitively show, even police documents, striking similarities, even exact images as if they were electronically generated themselves. And so when we could see the obvious evidence of a forgery, and then therefore the conspiracy to kidnap, and then the defrauding, and so all these felonies and all these misdemeanors began to unfold, and the medical practitioners who may be involved in this, in a child trafficking operation. We reported this to every state law enforcement agency that we could. And then when we discovered the federal crimes, we were reporting that to the FBI. And we went there several times, 4 or 5 times. And just to keep this short, because I know we'll be coming up on the time restraint here, but we went to the highest levels of the Department of Justice with all of our evidence. We have thousands of pages of evidence that can clearly show not just the evidence of the conspiracy and the defrauding and the forgery and all of those felonies, but the defrauding of the American people for our Title IV Social Security money. And because this woman is not married to Terry's father, we know that she had been a care provider for other children in the past, we think that they, under their so-called care provisions as foster placement, that they may have been receiving the large Title IV money, which could be, at least in our case, been up to $14,000 a month. Yeah.
Oh
So
my
you can kind of
God.
see as to how that might work in respect to making little payoffs here and there for certain people to facilitate this scheme. They did not agree with our way of life that we were homeschooling year round, and we were very successful with it. Within about 8 months of Amy being stolen, she became a scholarship winner for the state of Kentucky and to a college of her choice. And all of her other children were on the same path, but they ended up in probably one of the worst public school systems in the country. And we know that they've been hurting because of it. And so, you know, and then there was a third thing in respect, something that, you know, they kind of came up with in respect to Abby, but it became obvious that it had something more to do with it. They were not aware of a little condition that we were working, that we knew of per our dentist, that is common for most children when they're toddlers or babies. It's called baby bottle tooth decay, but sometimes it's like a genetic thing where some children, because either they're, you know, Terri was a breastfeeding mom, so even though we kept her mouth clean, you know, there's a normal wear and tear on the teeth, baby teeth we're talking about here. Well, dentists will give you an option, like they will say, well, you can either cap the teeth or just wait till they fall out and just make sure they don't get any infection. Well, we did that for for two of our other children. Now, remember, we had 7, so not all of them had that. But in respect to Abby, she was real close to having her new teeth come in, so we were just keeping her mouth clean, and she was fine. She was happy. And no problem. So that was something that they tried to tie to us when they discovered, you know, some of that condition, that we were somehow negligent. But really what happened was, if it was legitimate, we don't really know, it was probably that the temporary custodians who became the permanent custodians did not know of her condition and then were neglecting her in respect to what she really needed. So when we reported all of the crimes that we were discovering, we have been ignored and turned away everywhere we went. We actually met with U.S. attorneys and a U.S. attorney in West Virginia, with an HHS inspector and then a victim's advocate from the U.S. attorney's office there, who, after spending about an hour and a half with us, was convinced enough that we had enough evidence that he was going to forward it back to the state of Kentucky. And after it got forwarded to the state of Kentucky, they basically did nothing with it. Their response was that we should go back to the FBI. And when we got that kind of a response, we knew there was no way that they could have looked at it, because we had already been to the FBI, and everything that we had given them clearly showed that we had been to the FBI. So if you had really looked at that, why would anybody ever make a statement to like go to the FBI? It's like, it's just ridiculous, you know. So we ended up going up to the highest levels. Highest level, we tried to reach Attorney General Barr with all of our evidence. We went to the Attorney General of the United States, and then even with the obvious complicity, we even tried to reach the Inspector General, and then we tried to reach the White House, and we got no response, no reply. And then we went back to our representatives. We went to Senator Rand Paul several times, who was very well aware of what happened to us and what's happening to other families throughout the country. And we wanted a congressional inquiry as to why the DOJ was not investigating and prosecuting the obvious crimes that we had evidence of, and the evidence of a child trafficking operation that, through the family court system there, which on their court website, they claim that they are a national model that they began as a pilot project back in 1991. So we think what we uncovered there is likely uncovering, at least by our interactions with other families, like a script that has been benchmarked as a script. And it's really part of a seditious operation to destroy our country from within by fraud. And we want to wake up the American people to this. We want justice and the return of our children. And really the most egregious thing, being that we're people of faith, we have not been able to practice our faith with our children for 7 years, or, you know, for that whole time in which they were taken. And then in the midst of all of this, in August of 2016, I began to notice that my military pension was being taken in the name of child support. So they have taken over $45,000 of my military pension to date in the name of child support. And in addition to stealing my money from the military pension, the child support, they're stealing the American people's money.
Yes, they are.
Because they're getting the large amount of Title IV funding. And in the state of Kentucky, we uncovered that during this period that we went into a government site where they listed a number of children in out-of-home placement, and 97% were in non-relative placement, meaning that they were with strangers in foster care, or they were in institutions or other placements. And the reason for that, for your audience, is that large amounts of Title IV money only flow out to foster care placement. Very little flows out for relative placement, even though there are aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters, grandparents who are begging to be care providers, and yet they're denied. And the only reason for that is because it's the money. It isn't because there aren't fit and willing relatives willing to take care of children. But even when you look at it, it shouldn't be happening because really there's no crime. There's pursuant to a child abuse and neglect crime.
Mm.
And so, you know, people out there in your audience, I want you to know that when you see a sign in your community, or you hear a radio commercial on your TV or your radio asking for foster parents, think about what's really driving that, because it's like every day you'll hear one or we'll see one. It isn't because we have a lot of problem children or problem parents. Okay, they're taking people's children because every year, here's the threat. The threat is every year they have to take more children in order to receive an annual bonus under the adoption aspect. And so when they can adopt children now or they age out through the system, they have to go get more children on the other end. And this is where in our interaction, we talked to some other former people who have been in the system, and they will say that sometimes that they're familiar with, they have to have quotas. And so, you know, right now in our society, we have children that have dollar signs on their backs, and they will just fabricate things and come after your children like they did with us and like they are doing in every state across the country, even to this day. And so going back to the immunity aspect as we round it out, I'll turn it back over to you. There is no immunity, but as a last check and balance, we have the right, and our rights come to us from our creator, not from government. That's what it states very clearly in our declaration. That's our code. And our government was established to secure our rights. So government cannot take away our rights. They will move to terminate parental rights, like who they deem is not being a fit and willing relative. And there's no such thing. Government cannot terminate parental rights. They cannot deprive us of the right to sue and have criminal justice. They don't have immunity. And so these color of lawlessness immunity at the state, and then there's even one at the federal level that was implemented during the timeline in which we were subject to this travesty. It's a deprivation of our rights. And, you know, if we have our rights, that's the check and balance we can have. If we can have civil remedy, you know, I mean, why would you need immunity if you're doing the right lawful things, right? I mean, if you're following the correct process, like in our case, they didn't follow the correct process. Because of Amy's condition, allegedly, of anorexia, that is a mental health condition, okay? And in state law in the state of Kentucky, it's very clear under KRS 610050 that if the allegation involves mental illness, that they have to follow a Chapter 645 process. That was not afforded to us. It probably would have prevented the other 6 children from being stolen from us, and we would have been involved in Amy's care if there was anything legitimate, which we now know isn't even legitimate, because she was never diagnosed with that condition. And then here's the other aspect, going all the way back to the beginning. When that doctor or whoever came up with that fabricated thing about Amy being severely anorexic, that CPS supervisor said, you can't have a legitimate diagnosis of a mental health condition without a psychiatric evaluation and a physiological assessment to include the withdrawing of blood. So there could have never been any legitimate diagnosis. And so this entire thing from start to finish has been fraudulent. And we're out here in the public arena here. I'm going to turn this back over to you in a minute to let people know not just what happened to us, but what's happening in similar fashion to thousands of our fellow Americans across every state. And the effect is the destruction of lives and livelihoods and our freedom, and then the re-education of our children, which is what's happening. We're not allowed to pass along our American heritage to them, and they're being groomed and conditioned, even in beyond the sex trafficking industry, which we know is being funneled with our children through this system. They eventually move them into the human trafficking, and this goes worldwide. And our concerns are is that in our situation, the girlfriend of Terry's father has connections back to Lebanon, Syria. her family comes from Syria, from that area. And so we have, questions as to whether there could even be something international in scope. And so when we tie all that in with something that Terri found out, and let her talk a little bit about, well, the Explorer program, and then we'll give it back over to you. But there was something going on with the Louisville Metro Police in respect to the Explorer program, which gives even more credibility to what it is that we have found on our side of it. So I'll let her talk about that real quick, and then we'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so it was the Louisville Metro Police Department that was involved, coming to our house saying, you've lost custody of your children, turn them over. And so it was around this time, if shortly after that, there was a big investigation going on with the Louisville Metro Police Department for what they had was called an Explorer program, which was under the Boy Scouts of America. It was like a program for young people interested in law enforcement, I guess, something like that. And so there was some things going on to where they had to shut the program down. And there were eventually 2 or maybe 3 officers that were convicted for sexual abuse or something similar to that. So anyway, just the point of it is, if you look up Louisville Metro Police Department Explorer program, and then this was the police department that was wanting us to turn over our children without having any paperwork.
Yeah, so what happened to us is a color of law kidnapping of our 7 children who have been held hostage. 3 of them have aged out. We've been able to connect with 1. But the other 2, we have a real difficulty even communicating or connecting with, and we don't really know what's happening to them. The 4 younger ones we have not seen or heard from since they were stolen. And so we're out here to ask the American people for help in respect to joining together, to joining with us in our mission, so that we can prevent this from happening to anyone else, and help other people reclaim their children, because we're out here also on their behalf. Mm-hmm. And then also to work together, because they can just brush a family off here and there, kind of like they do, as they've done with us. But our hope and our goal, our objective is to join people together, build positive, healthy relationships, being a good neighbor to our fellow Americans, build those trusts, and then join together and show up and demand the corrective action from our people that we place in our system of government, who right now they're using our system against us to destroy us. That's the outcome. We have been homeless, and we've been devastated in a number of different ways. And so it's only by good people that we've been able to even get to this point, because we didn't even think we were going to be able to tell our story. And so that's a miracle just in and of itself. And so what you do, Marianne, is crucial to this, because the mainstream media, they will not report on it. And so it's people like you and independent media and getting the word out. And you can you can arrive at the truth on the facts, and we have the picture. And so again, some of that's already been posted out there on h3fc.com. People want to see some things, and there's going to be a lot more disclosure forthcoming. I'm going to encourage everyone who does visit that site to check out the interview with James White of Northwest Liberty News, titled 7 Counts of Kidnapping and Not One Arrest. And you'll see a lot of what it is that we brought forth here today through your platform. And so let me turn it back over to you, Marianne. We thank you so much for being patient and listening to us so extensively. And we're available to answer any questions that you or anyone else may have.
So you said it was the Northwest Liberty News interview that people can find on the h3fc.com platform.
That's correct. If you go into the About Us tab, you will see a whole series, and it's episode 8 of 10. And you will see how the non-relative placement, we actually did a survey across all 50 states. No state eclipsed the 50% threshold for relative placement. You can see, all 50 states, how they rank. And then you'll see some of the other things there correlating to what it is that we said in respect to the imaging and some of the other stuff. And so all of the things that we said, we can prove.
Right.
A lot more coming forth, because we have faith that the American people, properly equipped, will join together, because we cannot continue to allow this to happen in our country. And we're not going to have one if we continue to let it happen like this.
Exactly. Have you, people, it's like a knee-jerk reaction, go to federal court and sue.
Right. Well, up to this point, what they've been operating under is, oh, well, they have immunity, or it's going to cost you X amount of money. And we have been out here trying to get an attorney. We've been in the public arena now for 2.5 years through various platforms. And that's why we will go on everyone we can. And why we're thankful for you, because we know even if we just reach one more person with what's going on, is one more that we didn't have. And so no civilian attorneys are willing to take this on for various reasons. They're either afraid of losing their own license or having their children removed. And that's happened to some that we've come across in the past. And then the courts themselves just being corrupted. And then they know how much money is flowing. And then there are other compromises. It raises questions in respect to, well, they can just sit there and just arbitrarily dismiss it. And so, when we pursued that path through the criminal justice avenue, and we are still trying to this day to find an attorney who will take our case. And we even had attorneys that we met with who acknowledged our evidence and said, yeah, it's right there, but they won't do anything. It just begs the question as to what's really going on and what they're really a part of. And so, you can even go in yourself and they'll just arbitrarily dismiss it. We've seen people who've tried that. And so when we tried the criminal justice area, we thought there's just no way that we're going to be denied justice for all, right? And but we are, and this is what's happening across our country. And like I said, it's not just about what's happening to our children at stake, but our very freedom. That's what's at stake.
Exactly, because I know we're going to have another podcast because we still have more to discuss. So this will be part 1, everybody, and we're going to do a part 2 in the future soon. And because I myself went to federal court thinking, with all this evidence, over 1,000, well, under 1,000 pieces of evidence, I'm sure they're going to read this, and this is, a slam dunk. It really is. But no, the judge admitted to not reading any of the evidence, and he just ruled it irrelevant. So then I had to file a motion to make him read it, which I'm sure he didn't, and he still ruled it irrelevant. And I took it to the appellate level, and they entertained the case for about maybe 3 months, I'm thinking, and then they just dismissed it.
Yeah.
So, people say, oh yeah, just go to federal court, sue them. You can sue them. It's like, I was trying to sue an entity, 2 caseworkers, and another individual that started all this mess. And they don't do anything with accountability, at least not in this country. And I'm very sorry that here you are, a veteran, and they're double dipping, not only with the Title IV money, but also into your retirement.
Yeah.
That's double dipping.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, being a veteran, taking that oath, I'm not going to violate my oath, because for me, that's a religious question, or that's a religious issue. And I'm not, going to, I'm going to be faithful to my faith, and I'm going to be faithful to my oath. And, that's why we take oaths, and the people who do take oaths, they're being malfeasant to their oath because they have another agenda that they're carrying out. They don't care about their oath. And so, when you look at, well, by their fruit, you'll know them. When you look at the fruit in respect to the overwhelming amount of evidence and the fraud op that we uncovered, and the trafficking operation that we know that's happening, not just in Kentucky, but across many other states, it's up to we the people to join together and fix it. And our children are counting on us. What's going to be our legacy? That's my question as we close it out. What will be our legacy that our children will look back upon, and what we did or did not do to stop this from happening anymore?
Well, I'm very glad to have you on to share this information. And again, I'm going to have you back on. So don't jump off.
Okay.
Slam the Gavels, a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Terri and Mark Stemann in the future, and other exciting guests. One more thing, how can people reach you if they have any questions?
The best way is through email. They can email us at LetOurChildrenGo@protonmail.com. or we also have a contact page on the website at LetOurChildrenGo.org. They can just fill out the contact form there, or they can email us directly at LetOurChildrenGo@protonmail.com.
Okay. Well,
There's another email too on our website. It's
Mhm.
h3fc.com. It's h3fc@protonmail.com. That's the other one if they want to try that one.
Okay, so it's
Thank you again, Mary Ann. We're
Sure.
very honored to be with you today. Thank you again.
Okay, hey, okay, don't jump off. Thank you.
Thank you.